Hello and welcome to painting a cupcake with me today. With all of the bad news, I was in the need of some comfort food. Let's get started. I'm going to use a flat stone. You can use a wooden plaque, you can use glass, you can use anything that you'd like to paint this on. Just make sure your paint is compatible with the material you're using. I'm using an Americana white, Ceramcoat ivory, any ivory will be fine. A light pink for the frosting, pretty pink by Ceramcoat, but you could use Americana Fucia, that would be gorgeous for shading the frosting too. Alizarin Crimson or a very rich red, also for shading the frosting. Phthalo blue, and Ocean Reef blue, that's for the paper cupcake. This burnt umber is the perfect color for the chocolate part of the cupcake. And Dragonfly Glaze, red, violet, blue, and it's number 44382. I'll also be using Hologram. This is for the frosting, and I use it a lot, so I kind of buy a bigger jar of it. This is number 2782 Hologram by FolkArt. Now for the brushes, I'm using a number 8 round that comes to a very good point. This is an inexpensive brush that I get at Hobby Lobby in a pack of 12 for like $5. I'm going to use a flat brush to paint the base coat on the stone. I have a tendency to use a small brush, so you can use a larger one if you'd like to. Here's a picture of a larger one. It's a Craft Smart brush. Those are at Michael's, by the way. Also a 10-0. This is a fine liner, and I use it for some of the smaller artwork. And you'll see as we go along what I use it for. Here's the stone before I put the ResinArt finish on it. I have the ResinArt at the end of the video for you to take a look at the difference between the two. This has the hologram on the frosting and the Dragonfly glaze on the paper. I'm going to go ahead and put this base coat on the stone. I used the ivory. Sometimes I think white would have really been pretty, but I had already done this, so I'm going to finish the stone with the ivory. It looks like everybody's getting ready to be back at home for a while. At least in Texas we sure are. So plenty of time for us to paint. Maybe I can get caught up on some of my videos now. Now I am going to use a heat gun to dry this paint a little quicker. I'm not patient enough to let it dry on its own. I will put another coat on, and I'm going to kind of clean up the back side, so if someone turns it over to see what's going on over there, it looks a little bit finished. And use that heat gun. There we go. Look at that. I already got paint all over my hands. It had a few paintbrush strokes that were showing through, so I'm just using a shop towel. And it's not wet or anything. I'm just polishing off the brush strokes and making it smooth, and it gives it kind of a satin finish. So, yes, I'm going to put some splatters on the back of the stone. And I'm watering down the Phthalo blue with the Ocean Reef blue. I've mixed that, and I'm putting some water in with it. And you can see my splatters in that little tray are kind of big, so I'm going to add a little more paint and make it a little thicker, which will make the splatters a little bit smaller. Now as I'm tapping the brush on my finger, splatters will be coming off on the stone. And it's kind of hard to see in this video, but I'll show you. Right here. That's how they're looking. And I also wanted to add some pink splatters. So I'm using the baby pink and some water. I'm going to just add a little bit of water to this. Kind of like India ink. It's a very good consistency. And now I'm going to tap some of these pink dots on. A little bit more water. And this is how it's going to look when it's all put together. Already looks like confetti, doesn't it? Okay, I'm going to have a charcoal general pencil here in my hand, but you couldn't see what I was drawing, so I'm just going to use a regular pencil. I'm not pressing hard. It's very, very light. but you can see it. That's the paper. You got to have those little V lines at the top where the paper goes in and out. And I'm centering it a little bit more, so I'll just erase the lines that I don't want. This is the actual cupcake. That's the cake part. And here comes the icing on top. I'm going to have 3 swirls of icing up there, and that's what those curves are all about. I'm going to draw the lines down, which will be completely covered with paint, but I like a visual before I get started. There it is. Oh, I thought this milk chocolate would be perfect for the cupcake, but I think it's too light, so the burnt umber does win, and it's such a perfect color for a rich chocolate cupcake. And we're just going to paint this in using the round brush. It will take 2 coats. So I'm going to put it on here, go in between each of those V marks for the paper. I'll let it dry for just a minute or so, and then I'll put the second coat on. Here comes the second coat. After I finish with that, I'm going to smooth out the line where the icing is hitting the cupcake. There we go. There's our progress so far. Now I'm going to use white paint. My camera doesn't like it when I use white paint. It throws the balance off. So I'm sorry if some of this is a little bit hard to see, but after each section I'll show you a close-up of what's going on, and you'll be able to see exactly what we've done. Again, I'm using the number 8 round, and I am going to put white paint as a base coat so that the splatters and things don't show through when I'm doing the paper. It doesn't have to completely cover, but just give it a nice even finish. We'll also be painting the frosting with a base coat of white, so if you want to do that right now, you can. There it is. Now, I had to do a couple practice runs on this blue. I just couldn't figure out which side the light was coming from, but the light's going to be coming on from the left. So the shading's going to be on the right side. And right now I'm just kind of putting the line down from the top of the V halfway down. It's going to be darker on the right side and towards the bottom of the paper. So I'm going to shade on the right side of each of these lines just a little bit. You don't have to do this part perfectly because we are actually going to go over it again in detail a little bit later. And towards the bottom of the paper, the lines aren't as prominent, so I just kind of shade that in with the light blue, which is the ocean reef blue with a little bit of white mixed in. And see, I'm just painting the bottom darker, shading it up a little bit while the paint's wet, and going over the right side of the paper. And then we're going to leave it at that for right now. We'll come back to this later and add the detail. Let's get started on the highlights of the cupcake. I'm going to use some watered down white. I'm going to put a line along the edge and on both ends. Then I take the burnt umber, and while that white paint is still wet, I simply blend it into the cupcake. And this will make it look like a very moist cupcake. No perfect science to this. I'm just kind of blending it in. You really don't even notice it when you look at it, but the highlight gives it dimension and makes it look a little bit more realistic. I'm going to top coat, or I'm actually going to be base coating the icing with a white. It doesn't have to be a perfect base coat, but it needs to be completely covered with white. I do want the left side to be a bright white, so I will go back over that and make it a bright white, because that's where the light's coming from. I'm just blending the paint now, making it smooth. All right. The icing that I chose is going to be pink. So here's the baby pink. I'm going to take a little bit of that, and I'm going to blend a little bit of white paint into it to do the first coat. And then we'll accentuate that with the darker pink and Alizarin Crimson. So I'm just mixing white and pink and getting a very light pink. I'll be painting the whole thing with this. Here I'm using straight baby pink, no white mixed in. I'm going to go along the edge next to the cupcake and on the bottom of each of the swirls. Also to the right side, because that's going to be a little bit darker. Making it nice and smooth next to the cupcake. I hold my stones, so I know I move it around a lot, and I'm sorry about that, but I've always held the stones in my hand when I'm painting them. Okay, so I'm going along the right side of each of the swirls, all the way up to the top, and then I'm spreading this darker color along the edge of each swirl. In a minute I'll show you a close-up and you can see the colors a little better, because any of the light paints throw my white balance off on my iPhone camera. There's a little bit easier to see. Okay, Alizarin Crimson. We're just going to use a teeny bit of this. See? I just poured a tiny little bit, and I am watering it down just a little bit to make it thinner. I'm going to add a tad bit of white to it, or you can add the light pink. And I'm going to put a thin line to completely separate each swirl. I will go all the way across. Down along next to the cupcake, mainly on the right side. And that's all. The only other thing I use this color for will be for some sprinkles. Let's get back to finishing up the paper part of the cupcake. I'm using Phthalo blue. You can tell I use this one a lot. Phthalo blue. And I will be mixing it with a little bit of the light blue, because Phthalo blue, when you put it down, almost shows up like black. But it's beautiful when you mix it with other blues. So I'm getting a medium blue, adding a little water to thin it down, and we're going to start making our lines on this cupcake paper. So at the bottom of each point, I'll be making a line. My paint needs to have a little bit more water added to it, so I do it right here. Now, it's going to spread a little easier. I'm not taking this dark blue all the way down. And I'll put a little bit in between each one in the middle where the point is going straight up. I will be putting white on the right side of that darker blue line, all the way up to the tip of the point. I'm going to have to learn how to hold my stones a little bit more still so they don't move so much. But that white paint's on the left side of each of the point next to that dark line. And then I put a little bit of the phthalo blue with white mixed in it, and that's going to go on the left side all the way up to the point. Again, it's not perfect. It's cupcake paper. We're going to shade the bottom of this and kind of blend that up. Can't even really see the lines down there, and it'll be a little darker again on the right side of the paper. I wanted to add a little bit of bright white at the top of each one. You don't have to do this. It really didn't make that much difference. And I'm just going to go back and straighten out any details. I wanted to brighten the white a little bit. That's all I'm doing here. All the way to the right, I didn't put that much bright white. Alizarin Crimson, and I'm going to put some sprinkles on this cupcake. One thing that I didn't do is put a white dot on each one of these towards the top left to give it a highlight, but if you want to do that, you can, and you don't have to. Here, it was too big, so I'm using a Q-tip and a little bit of water, just kind of taking that paint off and redoing the sprinkle. I'm also going to use a little bit of fuchsia here, and I didn't give this to you as one of the colors, but it's really pretty, and it will stand out against that frosting. Now, you don't have to do this, but I'm taking the Alizarin Crimson and a little bit of the baby pink. I'm going to blend it, make it a shade darker than the icing, and I'm going to put it underneath each sprinkle to make a shadow. Again, I'm visualizing the light coming in from the left. When you're painting it, I think it looks kind of funny, but then when you look at the picture as a whole, it really does make a good difference. Down at the bottom where it's shaded there, really didn't need to be shaded, so those few sprinkles right there that I'm painting, it didn't even show up, and I left it that way. Now the sprinkles on the bottom. I'm going to be using a little bit of the burnt umber and mixing it with the ivory. See, when I say a little bit, I mean just a little bit. And I'm going to mix those two together to make shading on the sprinkles on the bottom. And we're also going to shade the cupcake so it looks like it's actually sitting on a table or a shelf. Okay. So I'm just kind of going from the edge of the cupcake paper all the way past it on the right side where the shadow would be cast. I'm going to use the darker umber. It's still mixed in with ivory, but it's a shade darker. It's going to go next to the cupcake paper and down a little bit, and I'll blend it in with a little bit of the paint and water mixed in. So I'm just blending it down here. See, now it actually looks like it's not just floating in space, but sitting down on the table. Hologram. I'm going to use the hologram and put it all over the top of the cupcake and over the sprinkles too. Yeah, you can see the sprinkles there. Oh, the sparkles are so pretty. The Dragonfly glaze, even though it says red, violet, blue, it'll actually have blue sparkles underneath or on top of this blue paint. So I'm making sure that I cover the whole piece of paper. I'm putting hologram on top of the sprinkles down there on the table too. You see that blue sparkle? And remember, that's before the resin art. It's so pretty though. There's the back side. That's where I sign it, ResinArt 58, and I put my name on there. And here's the finished project. It has the resin art on it. You can see the glorious shine and the blue glitter and the hologram glitter. It gives it a 3D effect. And in person, it just looks really, really good. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day. Bye.